He can move, can't he? He's been moving since I got here.
He's been moving since 5:45.
I mean, to tell you. It's good to be here. It was easy coming through Atlanta early in the morning. It wasn't but two other cars and me. No, it was better than that. But Al and I were on the phone the other day, and he asked me if I'd come and share some things. He said some things that had happened in my life had been an inspiration to him. And he also mentioned some things that you told him that was an inspiration to him also. And that's what it's all about. Listen, we need to encourage each other and inspire each other to keep on for the Lord, because we're living in day and time now that can be difficult. There's so much pulling at people now, especially in our younger generation. Man, they're being pulled so strong that it's difficult for them to remain true to the Lord and true to His church. So I'm going to do something this morning I don't like to do, and that's talk about myself. But He's asked me to do that. And I want to do it in a way that gives glory to the Lord, because it all belongs to Him anyway. I found out some things early, and that is in my walk with the Lord. And if you want the Lord to take care of you, you're going to have to take care of Him in your life. In other words, I found early some things in the Bible. There were some laws in the Bible that if they're operating in your life, it works. I mean, it works. And I'm over in 14th chapter of Luke. Jesus was so emphatic about being His disciple. In fact, He was so emphatic that He said, if these things are not in place in your life, you cannot be my disciple. And so I ask people, what about cannot? Don't you understand? I mean, He says, if you don't have this in your life, you can't be my disciple. Number one, I want to read in verse 26. If any man come to me and hate not his father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters, yea, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And then the next verse, whosoever doth not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Verse 33, so likewise whosoever he be of you and forsaketh not all that he has cannot be my disciple. Man, that's pretty emphatic, isn't it? I mean, Baptists can take one verse in the Bible and build a doctrine around it. And here we've got 3 different times in the last half of this chapter where Jesus is making a statement. A powerful statement. And so what I want to get you to kind of embrace and understand this morning is you got to be all in for Jesus. You've got to bet, as Al says, his little theme, bet it all on Jesus in your life if you want to receive the blessing. If you want His care, you're going to have to care about Him. That's what I'm saying. Throw it all in with Him. And when you do that, you're going to have His blessings on you. I told you there was several laws. One that I call the law of hearing, and he says in verse 17 of Luke chapter 8, which is a little bit back from where you are there now, verse 16, no man, when he has lighted a candle, covereth it with a vessel, or puts it under a bed, but sets it on a candlestick, that they which enter may see the light. For nothing is secret and shall not be made manifest, neither anything hid that shall not be made known and come abroad. Take heed. Now here's the law. Take heed therefore how you hear, for whosoever hath, to him shall be given. To him whosoever has what? Hearing. Okay, that's what he's talking about. That's his subject. If you've got it, and you're listening and you're hearing God, you're going to have more. That's what he's saying here. And whosoever hath not, in other words, if you've given up on listening to God and you're just drifting and you're on cruise control, him shall be taken even that which he seemeth to have. That's the law of hearing. And then there's the law of giving. Luke 6:38. Give, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, shall men give to your bosom. Listen, men can't give spiritual blessings. What do men give? Material blessings. Are you following me? And when Jesus gave us that verse, he gave us his economy. Give and it shall be given. Most people think the size of the outgo is determined by the size of the income. In Jesus' economy, the size of the income is determined by the outgo. Are you following me? In other words, you're going to have to give first, and then the income comes. Okay? That's just a couple of laws. And then there is, by the way, the law of what I call, if I can find it now, sometimes it gets away from me. Remember, in that passage, Jesus told them, it's in Luke somewhere. Remember, I'm 74 years old. I don't know how old you are, Keith, but anyway, there's a passage in Luke where he starts talking about this guy who was taking care of his master's business, and he'd fudge the books a little bit, with some of the guys, and boy, the Lord got all over him about that and threw him out. And there is a verse there in that. It says, where he says, if you will not be truthful with righteous mammon, how will you ever get hold of the true riches, which is, of course, the spiritual things of life, the Word of God, and things like that. So what have I tried to set the stage for by giving you those passages there is very simply this. You got to bet it all on Jesus. You got to get in, everything, dealing with your money, dealing with your spiritual life, dealing with everything. Now, when that's in place, hang on, because he's in the driver's seat, and you're going to experience a lot of things that you never dreamed that you would experience. Now, I guess my story goes back in the early 70s. I got saved in a Holiday Inn reading the Gideon Bible in Punta Gorda, Florida. I've been giving Gideon testimonies at the Gideon pastors' dinners for 50 years now. And I've been all the way to Phoenix, Arizona, to Washington, D.C. They just dragged me everywhere to give my testimony about being saved, reading the Gideon Bible. And I'm happy to do it. But I'm just about the end of the road. I can't get back at night as easy as I used to. So they know it, and so they're easing off on me. But after I got saved, the Lord, about a year after that, called me to preach. And when he called me to preach, I knew it was his word. It's very simple. Preach my gospel. Now, men who have received a literal word from God to preach the gospel, they know what I'm talking about. And after I got that word from God, I had just been promoted, I was working for a Fortune 500 company and about 3 or 4 years, and I had just been promoted to Florida sales manager for that company. They had just moved me to Orlando, paid for moving my furniture to Orlando from Tampa. And now I got to go in and tell them I've been called to preach and I'm leaving the company. Now, man, that was hard. But I had to do it, and I did it. I resigned from that company and quit in August without any knowledge of what God was going to do in my life next. And that's the truth. So I went out to the university that I'd graduated from, Florida, University of Central Florida, and I had them send my transcript to all 5 seminaries. I didn't know whether I was going to San Francisco or Louisville or where, man. And And so we came down. I hadn't heard from any of them. But I knew I had to leave. I tried to rent a U-Haul truck, and they wouldn't rent me one because I didn't know where I was going. He said, I can't rent you a truck. You don't know where you're going. Now, he made sense, didn't he? But I thought I was the one making sense because I knew God was doing something. Well, we were living in Winter Park, Florida at that time in an apartment. 3 little kids, boop, boop, boop. I mean little ones. My oldest one then was, I think, 6 or 7. He's 50 now, so I'll tell you something. But so I knew I was leaving. And I had, since he wouldn't rent me a truck, I got in the newspaper, the Orlando Sentinel, and started looking, and they had some trucks for sale. I had made money selling a house, so I went and bought me a truck. Brought it over and set it outside my apartment. And got a couple of fraternity brothers that I had out there at the university come, and they were going to help me load it on Saturday morning. Well, that Friday night, Kathy and I had let the kids go back in the back part of the apartment, and we were sitting at the table before we even cleaned any dishes up. And I looked across the table at her, and I could tell, she was nervous, and I can understand that. And she said, what are we going to do? I said, we're leaving in the morning. She said, we don't know where we're going. I said, we're going to get on I-75, and we are going north. I said, when we get to I-10, if he says go west, we're going to turn left. If he says keep going, we're going to keep going on up through Georgia. She said, I know, I understand, but she said, I'm still nervous about it. And I said, I know you are. And we prayed. And about the time I finished praying, the telephone rang. Now, if I get up a little bit with this, you'll understand why. I picked the phone up and I said, hello. And he says, are you Doyal Conley? And I said, yes, sir, I am. Now, this is at 8:30 Friday night. And I said, yes, I'm Doyal Conley. He said, well, I'm Dr. Fred Sandusky. He said, I'm the registrar at Southeastern Seminary in Wake Forest, North Carolina. He said, and he said, I know you're wondering why I called you at 8:30 on Friday night. And he said, to be frank with you, I don't know. He said, our board has met, and we want you to come. We believe God wants you at our seminary. Man, I wept right then. Amen. I wept, and I said, Dr. Sandusky, you won't believe what's going on in this house tonight and at your house. And I said, when I get up there Monday, I said, I'm leaving tonight. Thank you for calling, or tomorrow morning. And I said, I'll see you Monday morning. And when I got up there Monday, guess what? You already had me a house for rent. A house for rent that we could afford. I got to preach on the way up there that weekend at my home church one time. That's all I'd ever preached. Got to the seminary up there, and the first thing after I got there, a guy said, I can get you a job. I said, where? He said, over at the 7-Eleven. He said, but you'll have to work on Sunday. I said, forget it. I don't work on Sunday, and I don't sell beer. And he said, well, you'll just have to do without. And I said, God's not going to let me do without. So I go in to the seminary about a week or two after that. And they have a bulletin board near the field education office. And my name was on that. And I went in, I said, what do y'all need me for? He said, we've got a pulpit committee coming here Thursday night. Would you be interested in interviewing? I said, oh, yes. I was just really happy. So we went in there, my wife and I, on Thursday night. There was 2 other couples in there, 2 other preachers. Excuse me. Both of them had pastored little churches for 2 years. I'd preached one time. After both, they'd go in. One of them would go in and they'd leave. Another, they'd go in and then they'd leave. And I'm sitting there, and nobody but me and Kathy in there. And I said, let's go home. She said, why? I said, they pastored churches. We ain't got a chance with this church. And she said, no. Boy, I love it when she does that to me. I mean, she keeps me straight so many times that it's unbelievable. She said, no, the Lord's brought us this far. He's going to take us the rest of the way. Well, we went in and interviewed for him, and I went back to seminary the next day, and there was a note on the bulletin board that said they want you to come preach Sunday if you can. And told me what to preach. I want you to preach a Thanksgiving message. And I preached one time. Well, it must not have been too bad because they had me preach 3 more times and call me to the church. And what I'm trying to get across is there are things some of you're going to have to back off from in life, like that job and things like that, so God can come in and do what he wants to do. Well, I wound up in a really good little church up in North Carolina. My second church, I can tell you a chapter that I don't like to tell, but I will in my first church to illustrate something to you. In my first church, I had been there about a year. I was going to seminary, driving back and forth, 50 miles every day for 4 days. And you didn't go on Mondays. You go Tuesday through Friday. And it came to a point, Southern Baptists, through GAs, had in their material, had suggested that they invite some little black girls to come to their GAs. And they came to him and said, what'd you do? I said, you do it. And they invited them. And some of the men in my church found out about it. And I hate to tell this testimony because it is a horrible testimony for them. And what happened was they buttonholed me after church Sunday and said, you better go in there and call them and tell them not to come because we're going to stop them at the street down here. I said, you are not going to do that, and I am not going to call them. And I said, you're doing the stopping. I'm leaving church. And the GA girl, she's going to, the lady that was leading them, I said, she's going to be here to meet them. And so, well, it went on. I just left church and went home. But when I got home, I said, I just can't stand to have those little black girls embarrassed. And I called them. And I said, don't come. I'm sorry. Just don't come. And all my deacons went there, and every one of them turned against me. Every one of them. And I said, Lord, what am I going to do? I said, I can't stay here. Now, y'all can believe this or not. 2 Sundays later, a pulpit committee showed up from Lewisburg, North Carolina. I had no idea. I said, how did y'all get here? Oh, our son did a revival for you, and they told us about you, and we just felt like we wanted to come up and hear you preach. See, I had nothing to do with that. I didn't send out resumes or nothing. They just come. And, buddy, I wound up in North Carolina. And, man, you talking about people being saved? I had 5 school buses running every Sunday. I'd baptize 70 to 80 people every year. One night we had a revival on old Clack Stubbs. I don't know if you know Clack. Clack came up and preached, and on Thursday, now you know him, he preached on Thursday night. We had 42 people saved. I had Sunday school teachers counseling in every classroom we had all over the building, in our adjacent building. Man, I'm telling you, those were the good old days. It ain't like that anymore, folks, I'm telling you. But I'm going to try to finish up in about 15 minutes. All right, I think it'll take it. I'm going to jump from that into some more current things. Okay. After I was pastoring down in Savannah, Rothwell Street Baptist Church. You may know it in Pooler. I was pastoring down there, and I retired and come back to Gainesville because 2 of my kids had married in Gainesville. See, that's where preachers retire, where the kids marry. That's right. And so I'd come back to Gainesville, and we were attending this church. And one Sunday morning, this guy went down the aisle, and I could see he was kind of sickly. And he got down at the altar and prayed. Nobody was there praying with him, so I went down and prayed with him, put my arm around him, and I prayed with him. He was, I think it was Robert Ledford. I know it was Ledford. I think his name was Robert. And I prayed. I said, Robert, what's the matter, son? He said, preacher, he called it cancer. I don't know what it was, some kind of small cell, a large cell, something or another. And he said, I need another chemotherapy. We don't have any insurance. And he said, I can't afford it. I said, well, you come back tonight, and you'll be able to afford it. So I went home and told my wife, and she said, yeah. And so we wrote him a check for $1,000 and gave it to him that night. He came back that night. Well, to make a long story short, he did get the chemotherapy, but he died about 3 or 4 months after that. Didn't take any more chemo. Well, after that happened, people said, you just wrote somebody a check for $1,000? I said, yeah. I said, it wasn't my money, it's God's money. And about a month or two after that, I get a knock on my door. Boom, 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 boom. And there was a big old guy back out there, man. He must have been 6'3" or 6'4". Had on cowboy boots and a cowboy hat. And he went to church with me up there where we was going. And I had just met him one time, shook his hand one time at church. His name was Jimmy Nally. And I said, Jimmy, come in. Come in and visit with us a little bit. So he came in, he sat down over, and he said, preacher, I need to ask you something. And I said, what? Evidently, he had found out that I had given that guy, I don't know how he found it out, but I had given that guy $1,000. He said, I need to borrow some money. I said, Jimmy, how much money do you need to borrow? He said, well, they repossessed my wife's car and my truck. And he said, I got to have my truck to get to, I work with my truck, and I got to have it, and my wife needs a car to get to her work. He said, we're going to be ruined if we don't pay them and get them back. And I said, Jimmy, how much money you need? He said, $15,000. My knees just got weak. And I said, Jimmy, I said, you're asking me to lend you $15,000 and you, with no collateral, and you just defaulted on 2 notes? I said, I can't do it like that. But I said, do you have any collateral? He said, I got 134 acres. I said, what? He said, yeah. He said, Diane and her daddy left us 134 acres is what we're living on over. And I said, you got that much land and you're broke? He said, yes, sir. I said, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I said, if you'll give me 3 acres for that $15,000, I said, I'll write you a check as soon as you sign a promissory note. And he said, I'll do it. And I said, I'm coming to your place, and I want 3 acres right across the front toward the highway. You ain't going to put me on the backside. He said, I don't care where they are, preacher, just let me have that money. I got to have it. So, and filled out a promissory note, and he signed it, and I gave him a check for $15,000. I called my lawyer, and I said, close this thing in 3 or 4 days if you can. Her daddy had that land for 100 years. You ain't got to do no researching. And he closed it in about 3 days, man. We met, and her and her sister and Jimmy all signed the papers. Well, I went over there, and when I had it surveyed 3 acres. And it backed up to a fish pond, a big old fish pond. And I was going to build 3 spec houses on it. And it got cold that winter, and I didn't want to fool with it. And so I said, I'm just going to wait till the spring. We'll go over and start breaking ground. And he called me. after about 6 months. And he said, "Preacher, you want to sell your land?" I said, "No, I don't want to sell my land." He said, "You ought to." I said, "Why?" He said, "I sold mine." I said, "You sold yours. How much did you get for it?" He said, $1,400,000. I said, "Did you sell 131 acres?" See, he had 134. I got 3 of them. He sold 131 acres for $1.4 million. He said, "He wants your land, preacher." He had to have my land to get out of there. And I said, "I'll tell you what you do, Jimmy." I said, "I'll think about it." And I said, when he gets ready to ask me for my land, just tell him to call me. Give him my number. I ain't calling him. And I didn't call him. And it was about 2 days after that, my phone's ringing, and this big old developer, he's on the other end of the line. He said, "Have you thought about selling your land?" I said, "No, I'm going to build 3. I said, "I'm going to build 3 spec houses in there." He said, "I got something I want to share with you I think you ought to think about." I said, "Well, I'll think about anything." I said, "I haven't broke ground over there, but I got 3 acres already surveyed off over." And he said, "I'd like to buy your land." I said, "You would?" He said, "Yeah, I'd like to buy your land." I said, "Well, my land is not for sale right now, and it'd take a good bit to get me to sell it." And I said, "That's what you need to think about." And I hung up. And I hung up. And so I told Kathy, I said, "We'll sell it, but he's going to pay for it when he gets it." And I won't tell you how much. But
Tell me what you did with the money, though, preacher.
Huh?
Tell. That's how you bought your home, man.
Oh, yeah. And then some. and well, he finally called me back, and he said, "How much you want for it?" And I told him. I thought it'd choke him. But I knew he was a $1.4 million into that project, and he couldn't do it without my land. So I told him, and he didn't even cough. He said, "When you want to close?" And I told, he said, "We'll close." I said, "When you want to close?" He said, "We'll close tomorrow if you want to." I said, "That's fine with me. Me and my wife will be there." And I turned to Kathy and I said, "I blew it." She said, "Why?" I said, "I didn't ask enough." She said, "Ask enough?" She said, "Do you know what you paid for that land and what you got for it?" And I said, "Yes, I do." And I said, "Ain't God good?" God has taken care of me everywhere I've ever been. So after I had to quit pastoring to take care of her and become a caregiver, when her health got so bad, I said, "Lord, I need a ministry." And guess what? The Lord brought a fellow in my life named Dennis Bowie. And Dennis is my ward. Dennis is my stepson, I guess you'd call him, or my foster son. He can't see out of this eye. He got something poked through this eyeball. He lived on that Yellow River over on Stone Mountain most of his life. Just lived outside. Pitiful. He fell off a Stone Mountain. Y'all think I'm kidding you, but I am not. I'll bring him down here and put him in front of his church and let him tell you all about it. But he can't drive. He can't see very well out of this eye. He showed up at our church one Sunday, and he come in soaking wet. He walked to church in the rain. And I took him home, and that's when I got to meet him the first time. Now, I haul him everywhere. I take him to the doctor. I help him with Social Security, keeping his disability coming, and all those things. And ain't no telling how much money I spent on him. He never has enough to pay for his propane bill or his power bill or something. Our Iron Men group at the church got him that house. Rented it for him the first month, and we paid that rent I don't know how many times, and I have too. But that's how God brought that into my life. And I've always wanted to be a giver like that. And every time I start giving and helping somebody like that, something comes in the back door. After I started helping Dennis, I get a letter from somebody who wants to be my benefactor. And of course I said yes. And they send me $300 every month. And then the Georgia Baptists, they send us a, what do you call it, that little letter you get if you get medical problems. You know, if you got medical problems during the year, they'll give you some reimbursement for that. It's amazing. It's amazing. You just got to throw in with God all the way. I didn't think we'd ever be able to retire. But we were, and we did. And he's still telling you. And I got one more to tell you. You know that little red car out there? I got to tell you about that one. That little red Nissan Rogue out there. There was a lady that played the piano in my church, the last church I pastored up in Haversham. That was there for 7 years. And I was her pastor, and after I left, I'm still her pastor, and her husband's pastor. And both of them made me promise to bury them when they die. Of course I did. I said, but I'll be cold in the ground a long time before y'all die. But promise me, preacher, promise. I promised him. And when I walked out the door, he said, you're my pastor, and you'll always be my pastor. And I said, well, you're going to have other pastors. Don't go too far with this. And he said, I won't. Don't worry. Well, she brings me a fruit cake. She makes the best fruit cake in the United States. Homemade fruit cake. Man, I'd fight for one of those things. Fist fight for one. And she brings me one every December, about the first week in December. Well, she drove up a couple of years ago. And she drove up in that little red Nissan out there. And I said, oh, that's the prettiest little car. I said, that thing is nice. And she said, preacher, she said, would you like to buy this car? And I said, well, it depends on how much it was. She said, well, my husband is retiring. For Cox Communications in Atlanta, big job. He was a big shot down there. And he got a big something of the money when he come out of there. And she said, he just bought him a brand new Ford Raptor pickup truck. If y'all know what Raptors are, you know you're looking at about 60 grand on that truck. Easy. And she said, he's buying me a new Ford Explorer. He wants me in a little bigger car. And she said, when I get that Explorer, this little car is going to be for sale. So she emailed me one day. She works in the president's office at Piedmont College up in Demorest. And she emailed me one day and said, the little red car is for sale. So I emailed her back, and how much you want? She said, I'll call MJ, and he'll be in touch with you. So he sends me an email. Here it comes. Here's what it said. It said, dear pastor, and you'll always be my pastor. Don't ever forget that. He said, my pastor's price is $3,500. But if you try to start Jewing me, it will go up to the out-the-door price at a dealer. And I texted him back, and I said, I'm not Jewing. I'll take it at $3,500. Right after I went to Kelly Blue Book and found out that car's worth nearly $10,000. And it just it didn't have a lot of miles on it. And So I texted him back, and I said, I'll take it. He said, well, we'll bring it to you Thursday night. And I said, I said, I'll come get it. He said, no. He said, Debbie and I want to come visit y'all anyway. We'll come. She can drive it, and I'll drive my car, and we'll bring it to you. And so they showed up. We visited a little bit, and I went in the kitchen to the island, and I took out the envelope, and I said, I want you to count this. He said, preacher, I ain't going to count that. He said, are you crazy? You're my preacher. I know you ain't going to cheat me. And I said, well, you ought to count it. He said, no, I ain't going to do it. And he threw it down on the island. He got this title out, and he signed it and handed it to me. And Debbie, she's standing there beside him, and she said, MJ, he's going to have to register that title. You know what they do with that now, don't you? He said, oh, yeah, that's right. You know, if you register a title in Georgia now, buddy, you pay 6.5% on it then. Now, you don't have to pay ad valorem tax ever again, but you pay that 6.5%. And he said, that's right. And he said, how much you think that would be to register this car? And she said, I don't know, maybe $500 or $600. And he picked that money up and counted off in dollar bills for me to register that car. Now, do y'all know what the net on that $10,000 car was? $2,500. I'll drive that till they take me out in a box. And you know what the really good part? Now, I know this may sound funny, but the really good part about it is I was driving a car, the seats were kind of down low, and my wife with her back, when I take her to the doctor, I'd have to just drag her up out of that. And when she got in that little Nissan Rogue, little SUV thing, the first time she just backed up there and just turned around in the seat. And then I saw the hand of God. I knew what was happening at that point. I couldn't figure it out until then. But I know why I got that car. I'm going to haul Dennis around in it. She can get in it and get out of it real easy at the doctor's office. That's the only time she gets in a car. It's when we go to the doctor's office and come back. She can't ride and do things like most people do. So that's just kind of a capsule of how God is taking care of me everywhere, every turn. And it's all because I threw in with him and never looked back. Never looked back one time. There were times in my life where, I was faced up against the wall in some things. And God just opened doors. Brought people into town that wanted to do things for the Lord and brought me into those things. It's amazing. And took care of me. I wish I could tell you everything, but it would take all day. And I get in Brother Keith's time, and I don't want to do that because I know he's going to share some wonderful things with us. So let me encourage you with this. I'm 50 years into throwing all in with the Lord. And I've never looked back, and I've never been sorry one time. And let's just say, for instance, I know this can't happen, but let's just say if there were no heaven, I've had the best life anybody could ever have walking with Jesus. And I'm telling you, everybody, it doesn't have to be preachers, does it? Anybody can. If you're willing to throw in. You say, well, I got to deal with work. I got to deal with it. He's going to deal with it with you. And that's the key. That's the key. A yielded life can be molded and taken care of by Him if you'll let Him. But that choice, that decision is where the rubber meets the mold. If you are able to make it, you're going to be blessed.